Minding the Gap is a 2018 Hulu documentary that's directed by Bing Liu. So Minding the Gap is actually a patron pick from no other than Tyree, and it's been a long time coming, so my sincere apologies for taking so long to get this one out, but I actually rewatched it to refresh my memory, so it's very clear in my head, and I'm honestly really glad that I did that, because it helped me remember how much I really adored this movie. Minding the Gap, to me, was a really special kind of documentary because of how personal and intimate it felt. The filmmaker, Bing Liu, actually grew up with all the people that we witness in this movie. And it made this movie feel so much more authentic, even more authentic than your average documentary is supposed to feel. And it becomes apparent that the subject matter that's explored in this film hit very close to home to the filmmaker in ways that I don't think he really expected when he first began this documentary. But first I want to talk about the title of the film, Minding the Gap. I just think the title, Minding the Gap, is a great title to give this documentary because there's several layers to that, several different meanings to it. The first obvious one that jumps to mind is the actual skateboarding stunt or trick, which is to jump a gap or mind the gap or whatever. But, beyond that, I do think that the title was chosen because of the generational gap that's displayed between parents and their children in this film. And also just the gap between ethnicities and understanding each other's backgrounds. I'll jump more into that later, but there's definitely like a thematic layer to this film that explores just a kind of ignorance of, again, understanding where people come from. But ultimately, I do think that the biggest takeaway from this film is the gap between parents and their children. I think a lot of what this film ultimately explores by the end of it is that the larger the gap is between a parent and their child, the larger the struggle will be for that child as they progress into the responsibilities of adulthood. Of course, people are ultimately allowed to make their own choices in life, but what I think this film beautifully demonstrates is how deeply influential the family foundation is to the future of a human being. And it's demonstrated so well to the point where it's nearly impossible for any audience member to watch it and not understand that influence and that impact. And it's because of, again, how personal it all felt and how personal it actually is. And, like, the entire structure of everything as well, because we get a lot of footage of Bing and all of his friends even when they're like 11, 12 years old. And we spend, again, this documentary takes place over the course of what feels like a decade or more. And we just get to see the progression of everything. We get to see interactions between these kids, his friends, and their parents. And we just kind of get to see also all of his friends have this sense of vulnerability around him, even with the camera on. And it just makes for such, not only an emotionally impactful experience by the end of it, because what it progresses into, it just kind of gets crazier and crazier. But again, just through the structure and through the personal nature of everything, it really does make it to where it sends the message so clearly to the audience in a way that seems fair and nuanced to where everybody can come away from it really understanding what the filmmaker was able to capture with everything. And what makes it even more compelling is that, as I kind of mentioned earlier in this review, is that I feel like when Bing, the filmmaker, first started shooting this documentary, I don't think he could quite foretell what was going to happen. This is just kind of capturing life as it was, and he was able to capture incredibly important subject matter regarding, again, the influence of a family backbone and how that contributes to the future of a child, but also subject matters that hit really close to home for the filmmaker, which have to do with domestic abuse. In this film, again, we follow one of his friends who, through alcohol reliance, and, the struggle of maintaining and dealing with the stresses of a relationship involving his own child, he gets to see through his own eyes and through his own lens what progressed into something that was, in a way, abusive. And we get to see that as he is filming this documentary and realizing that he is witnessing the birth of domestic abuse unfold, it compels him to go back to his own home and speak to his own mother about his domestic abuse experiences, dealing with the abuses that he had to deal with as a child. And it's just like, it just comes off as a very personal and cathartic experience where this filmmaker who didn't even realize it was going to progress into this thing is now having to deal with his own demons and, have this therapeutic and cathartic experience with his mother. And it's all displayed on camera for everyone to see. But I also really love how this film was able to express the motivation and the appeal behind skateboarding, at least in regards to his circle of friends. Because the film expresses beautifully that skateboarding, for the most part, was really just a way for them to escape the kind of oppressive confines of their homes to where they could finally feel like a sense of freedom and a sense of control of their own lives. And there's like this really great segment where one of the main characters, well, I think he is pretty much the main character of this film. I think his name is Kier. And he basically kind of tells the audience that skateboarding, in a way, has been kind of a drug to him. In the sense that it distracts him from all the traumas and all the complications that he's been dealing with growing up. And it's a way for him to deal with all of that repression and depression that plagues him when he goes back home. And Kier in this film in general just really does come off as this genuine guy who is just dealing with so many conflicted feelings, doesn't really know what to do with everything that is bottled up. And I just really admire the vulnerability that he gives to everybody throughout this film, especially nearing the end. And it's just a really profound journey that we get to see, this young man progress into adulthood. And as I mentioned earlier, in this film, he's, amongst many other things, he is trying to deal with the difficult task of understanding the significance of his ethnicity in this country and how it relates to all of his friends around him, which are predominantly white. And there's a handful of moments in this film and scenes that are just, they're really cringe to watch just because of the extreme lack of sensitivity that his white friends have around him when it comes to the use of the N-word, or when it comes to consuming media where the N-word is the cornerstone of the joke. And it's just, sometimes it's difficult to watch because obviously he has trouble understanding himself, but the people around him obviously, I feel like, don't even come close to understanding or having any sensitivity towards him as well. But even his friends are a product of their environment. They're a product of circumstance, and it's hard to fully blame even them for behaving the way they do. But on another note, before I wrap up this review, there's another person in this film that goes by the name of Zach Mulligan that we follow throughout the experience. And what he devolves into by the end of this movie is both, it's heartbreaking in one way, but in another way, it's so frustrating. It's heartbreaking in the sense that, again, you can't help but understand that he is a product of his environment, and his actions are more than likely a reflection of the failed household that he came from. But at the same time, it does hit a point, especially in the final 15 minutes or so, where it's at this point, you know what's right and what's wrong, and you're just refusing to just take accountability, be the responsible person. And there's moments here in the final 15 minutes where he just comes off so arrogant and so pretentious and so self-loathing. And it's just, it's difficult to watch because you're just met with so many different feelings in your head. But at the same time, it's quite clear that he is dealing with the struggles of alcohol abuse and addiction. So, I don't know. But either way, his character is a very crucial element of this film. And I think like every character, like the main character Kier, Zach, and the filmmaker himself, Bing, they all play a very, very crucial role into what makes this film so thematically and emotionally compelling. And I just think the way that this film is structured, the way that it's edited together, the way that he was able to compile a lot of this personal footage, even from his childhood years, and incorporate it in this documentary in the way that it was, it's very compelling and very effective. And it's what makes it feel so intimate and so special. And I just really loved it, and I just feel like you really do get so much out of it. So I'm going to give Minding the Gap a soft 9 out of 10. Obviously, I think that this is an incredible documentary. It's on Criterion, so I recommend, if you haven't seen it, watching it on Hulu if you have Hulu. That way, when Criterion season rolls around this July, if you enjoy it, you can have something to buy during the season. But yeah, I really liked it, and thank you so much, Tyree, for requesting it. That's all I got to say about Minding the Gap. If you really enjoyed what I had to say about the documentary, please give it a thumbs up and share it amongst your friends. And don't forget to subscribe to the channel to be updated on more film-related content.